Welcome, folks, to this very special edition of Tech Sales Advice. I, of course, am your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live show for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders, and by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And I have to say, I am very, very excited for today's conversation. Mr. Nick Capozzi from Demostack. Now, folks, I'm sure you can appreciate this. There's certain people when you meet, you just feel an instant connection. It just clicks. And Nick is one of those guys for me. He's lived at sea, and we're gonna ask him about that. He's charismatic, he's smart,
Man,
he's the
can you do
chief
all my PR, Chris? Like,
he's
can
the
we?
he is the chief storyteller. I think he cleans, he sings, he dances. Nick, how are you, my friend?
Oh man, holy cow! You're making me blush, buddy. I do cook, but I don't sing and dance. So for what that's worth.
That's where we're gonna cut it off.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm super excited to be here with you, Chris. This is gonna be a lot of fun because you and I have had a few conversations before we've done this, and I think just there's a lot of chemistry between us, and I'm excited to be here. So.
Well, I told you I've been thinking about this, and we just finished demo fest, so I've been standing up and waving my hands and talking to people all week. But probably I think I saved my energy for today. By the way, I told you we might have some folks online. Tony Franchetic, who's been on this program. Tony, it's good to see you. You might break LinkedIn Live. I sure hope not. Tony, it's good to see you. By the way, if anybody else happens to join us live, if you want to say hello, please do. We don't actually have eyes on you. And at the very least, say hello. You're welcome to ask any questions. So Nick, I introduced you. And here's the amazing thing to me about you, Nick, is you've been in this sort of this pre-sales community for all of about 7 minutes. And yet you seem to have one of the biggest, most well-known personas in this community already. So do you mind taking a minute to share a little bit about your background? I mentioned that you lived on a ship for a number of years. Talk a little bit about that part of your career, and then how in the world did you end up with Demostack and in this pre-sales community?
Okay, I can go down a rabbit hole with this story, so I'll try and keep it to like a minute. But so I grew up in Canada, and I knew when I was a kid that I wanted to work in radio. So I went to college in Toronto for radio. And I worked in radio for about a year until I realized there was no money in it. And all my buddies from college were in TV, so I kind of moved into TV. So I spent 5 years in radio and TV, doing a lot of stuff in front of the camera, trying to present and do stuff like that. And one day I was at this party. And I met this guy, and he said, "Can you do that radio thing on a stage?" Next thing I knew, I stepped onto a cruise ship in Miami, and I actually spent 10 years living at sea, pitching product on a stage. And people are always like, "What were you selling on a cruise ship?" We sold the duty free, and most people think liquor and perfume. It was really like Swiss watches and jewelry. It was great duty free prices on those. So I have 10,000 hours over 10 years pitching to like 500 people at a time. Became a trainer. Trained 800 people on presentation and soft skills, storytelling skills, and worked my way up. And I got out just, tired, burnt out. I live in Phoenix now, so it sounds cool. You're going to Stockholm to get on a ship, but it's like Phoenix to LA to Heathrow to Stockholm. 36 hours later, I smell like I just played a hockey game. So I was looking for a change. And right before the pandemic, I actually got out, and I took a job with a manufacturing firm, and it wasn't exactly what I was looking to do. So I quit mid-pandemic, September of 2020, and I started posting content on LinkedIn. There was an intention. I wasn't trying to get involved in technology. That was by accident. There was no master plan. I was just talking about what I knew, which was presentation skills. So tips on talking with tempo and when to pause and how to get people engaged in stories. And it was tech that kind of picked me up. It was these AEs that were doing these demos, and I got my first call from a sales leader. He said, "Hey, Nick, can you sit on demos?" I'm like, "You bet I can." And that's what I did for about 18 months. And It was a lot of fun. But what I realized was, for me, I like being part of something bigger, being part of a team. And the consulting was fun, but I like carrying like someone else's flag when there's a whole group of people kind of rowing in that same direction. Yeah. So long story short, like 2.5 months ago, I put a post up on LinkedIn, And I said, I kind of don't want to do this anymore. I know this is risky saying I don't want to consult anymore, but I don't want
Yeah.
to. I want to do what I did in cruise, which is a mix of like events, partnerships, and content. What does that look like? And lo and behold, there was I was very fortunate. There was some interest, and Demostack said, "Hey, we actually know you. Let's have a conversation." And I talked to Kristen, who's my boss at Demostack, and I said, "Here's how I look at this. I'd love to be, doing this. I'd love to get involved in communities. I want to make content. I want to teach people. I want to give value." And they loved it. And so I became the head of storytelling at Demostack, which is, it's kind of an evangelist role, but basically shining the light on what we do. And it's been a lot of fun. We might have to put up a paywall and have cruise ship stories. So if you want the real kind of true crime cruise ship stories that a lot of people like to hear, I've got some wild ones. But that might be for another conversation. So that's
awesome.
it. I was probably more than a minute. I apologize. But
No. I so love that. Well, and when you were selling goods on these cruise ships,
yep.
would you say that was sort of like giving a demonstration on stage?
It's exactly what it was, right? Because I was getting, so let's talk about Swiss watches for example. We have iWatches now, if we even have a watch, because we have our phone, but there's like the level of detail and technology that goes into these Swiss watches. I mean, it's actually mesmerizing. A lot of them don't have a back on the back of the case, and you can watch the mechanisms. So it's not different from product, right? When we're building these tech products. So you'd have someone come on who maybe wasn't even interested in Swiss watches, but when you would kind of talk about how it worked and what was fascinating about it and the intricacies and the detail, people would get excited. So that's exactly what I did. I gave demos on stage, no question. It's not even close. It was exactly what I did.
And when you're at this party and somebody says, "Hey, you want to jump on this floating village and get on stage," and did you have any idea that you were launching into a 10-year career? And what was going through your mind? Like, what was going through your mind when that invitation went and you accepted that invitation?
Well, it was really interesting. So I actually couldn't stay at that party because I actually had a gig emceeing that night, but my dad stayed. It was at a neighbor's house. And I woke up the next morning. I said I wasn't interested. I said, I heard about that, 80 hours a week, 8 months. I'm not interested. But I woke up the next morning and my dad got in my face. He never did. He said, "You are going to work on that bleep cruise ship." And they had sold him on it over a couple hours. So that was it. And I thought at first, honestly, like as a lark, like I'll skip a winter. Okay, I don't have to shovel snow in Markham, Ontario for a winter. And what wound up happening was I got hooked. One became a second contract, became a third. And then there's something pretty special about, like literally the ship comes in and docks in the morning, and I would like look through my little porthole and open my drapes. Where am I? Well, I'm in
that's
Grand
awesome.
Cayman. There's no dock. I got to take the tender over to Grand Cayman today. And it was just really exotic, and it was a lot of fun, and people were having fun. I got to work with people from all over the world. I remember one ship that I worked on, there was over 100 different countries represented in the crew.
Awesome. That's awesome.
And I think part of the reason too I wanted to be part of something bigger for me was I'd have 4,000 guests and 1,200 crew. I would have 1,000 interactions in a day, whether an actual conversation or facial gesturing with people. So I was used to people. So when the pandemic hit, it really, I know a lot of people struggled, but for me, it was, I got a nice little condo in Phoenix, but it became like, okay, I'm in there 23 hours a day. This isn't going to work for me. I need to be on the road. I need to be out there. I need to meet people. That's where I give a lot of energy, but that's where I get my energy as well.
Yeah. It probably felt like a jail sentence for you.
I don't want to make light, but it was a struggle. There's no question. There's
difficult.
No question.
So if I recall, you said that you were literally the number one salesperson in the cruise industry.
Gosh. I hope no one from cruise hears that, because there were I was definitely in the top.
You were in the top. So I was gonna say I love things in threes, but then I wrote a book and there were six, so maybe I like two sets of threes. But if you could narrow down to three things that you did on stage that made you stand out from the crowd and really made you successful on stage, demonstrating and selling to people there in the audience? What would those three things be?
So let's start with the first one of we were given scripts. So, our partners would like literally pay for the time that they were getting. So we were trained to like memorize these scripts, but people would be behind a podium and they're reading the script and it wasn't authentic. You weren't getting out there and really telling a story. So what I would do, because I was a trained broadcaster, that was really truly my advantage, was I would take these 60 minutes of scripts and I'd break them down into 20 bullet points, right? So I always knew kind of where I was going to go. And if I needed to come back to my North Star, I'd kind of float behind the podium and just, oh, here I am. Okay, great. Now I'm pulled back in. So what this allowed me to do was really walk around the stage, right? Which seems simple, but we were on the big stage that like the production shows were on. Like imagine you're on a Disney ship. They've got Disney shows on the stage. And then here's this guy, this 6'3" Canadian, walking around. But it was really interesting because what happened was I was holding people's attention, right? It was that engagement, which is, again, it's exactly like a demo. So being able to really interact with the crowd, I think was really interesting. The other, and this isn't something I can really teach, it kind of happened by accident, but think about this. If I've been on stage for 10,000 hours in front of 500 people, it's kind of this homogenized American crowd, right? So typically, we kind of know how to talk to people from where we live, but I was watching the body language of people from Des Moines and Denver and Detroit. And what happened was I was seeing where everyone kind of got impact from what I was saying. And just reading that body language, that's the second thing was, understanding your audience and who you're talking to and how are they reacting. So often I think when we're presenting or demoing, we're so focused on getting it out and almost putting sometimes a square peg into a round hole, as opposed to really understanding, is this resonating with Chris right now? Is he in a positive movement? How is his body moving? Right. I mean, there was times I could have 20 or 30% of my crowd like nodding in unison. That was really interesting.
Powerful.
Yeah. And then the third thing was, and this was actually off the stage, but what I did was I never promoted what I was doing. But I was everywhere on the first day. So I had to get 500 people into this dark theater on the first C day, right? So you're flying in from New York, you get to Miami in the middle of winter. You want to be top deck by the pool at lunchtime. So I really had to get people to come in. So what I would do is I would walk around the ship and I would solve problems, right? I would kind of do discovery. I mean, I'll tell you this story. So what I used to do, one of the key things I would do was the longest line on the first day of the cruise was at guest services. I mean, you'd have hundreds of people there, sometimes in line for over an hour. And a lot of them didn't need to be in that line. So I would, and all the, the hotel director, the F&B manager, everyone was out there trying to solve these problems, but they weren't really engaged. They were on the periphery waiting for someone to come and say, here's my problem. So I'd walk through the line. It was not my job. It was not my department. I technically shouldn't have been there, but I would say, hey, sir, I'm not guest services, but can I ask what your question is just to make sure you're in the right line? Half the time they weren't. So I'd say, oh, this hour-long line, you don't need to be in there. You need to be over there in that 2-minute line. People are like, oh my gosh, wow, thank you so much. Then they would look at my name badge and they would say, oh, where are you from? Oh, hey, what do you do, Nick? And I would talk then about, oh, yeah, I had this great presentation tomorrow. You should come. And literally that in a combination of, we also had a TV channel on the ship. So back in like 2000 when I started, I'm dating myself a bit here. If you cruised, you had 3 TV channels. You had CNN, you had ESPN Deportes, because we were 2 miles offshore. You couldn't show ESPN in English, so it was all Spanish soccer. And then this shopping channel. And
Nick.
Well, and it wasn't even supposed to be me. It was supposed to be brands would pay to have these loops of their videos, and I would kind of hijack it. And I would still tell the brand stories, but it was me telling the stories. I showed up with my own little camcorder, and I would tell their stories. So now I was recognizable. So now when I'm walking through the ship, people are like, people would come right up to me. Where do I know you from? I know you from where? I'm like, oh, I'm the guy on TV. Oh, that's where, you know what? Yes, I watched it last night. I couldn't turn it off. So I was doing demand generation with video on cruise ships, 22 years ago. So.
I mean, but we could just end the conversation right now. You could go to the airport and everyone would get their money's worth right now. So I'm just going to double. By the way, we have a comment from Munir Hassan, three
What's up,
gems
Manir?
from Nick. Munir, thanks for chiming in. By the way, folks, if any of you want to say hello or ask Nick a question, please feel free to do so. Again, we don't have eyes on you, so it's hard for to tell who's out there. So the first key point was you took the script, but you really made it your own. And
Yes.
you narrowed it down to a couple of key bullet points, but then it was authentic. It was Nick speaking to the audience, right? But you could always return to your list to go back to True North, right? The second was that audience engagement, right? It's interesting, Nick. I heard this recently. I listened to a gentleman talking about presentations, and he said, there's this interesting tension between us and our material and the audience. And we want to find that if we're too far, he said, imagine you and your stuff is on one wall, the audience is on another wall, and there's sort of this gravitational pull. And if we're too far to the wall of our stuff, it means we're not really engaging with the audience and connecting with the audience. But sometimes we're drawn too far to the other wall and we sort of forget what it is that we're talking about, right? So you sort of need that. It's sort of finding that interesting balance between those tensions. Does that resonate with you?
100%. And I think, the part of the problem is we drink our own Kool-Aid, right? We're so sure our solution. And I'm going to tell you something. I was, a long time ago, I was much younger, but I was very arrogant. And I was like, I'm a closer. I know. Now what I realize is closing is a myth, right? Everything is about discovery. And what was interesting was how we used to do discovery was, okay, so, Chris, Mr. and Mrs. White are interested, and we weren't thinking about maybe buying something, but what is really the advantage? So my discovery is, well, what are you celebrating, Chris? Why are you cruising? What's your why now? Right. Oh, you're on your 15th year anniversary. Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations. What do you have? Great. Yeah. Oh, you're going in Grand Cayman. You're going to go swim with the stingrays. Fantastic. Yeah, definitely stop into Kirk Freeport if you're looking for that watch. They've got the best selection in the Caribbean. And our discovery was more their why they were out doing something. But I have doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on discovery. To me, everything is discovery now. And when I sit in on demos, I still feel very often I'm being pushed in a direction. And I don't feel that, I don't want to say I'm not being heard, but I'm the one with the problem. I'm the one shopping for a solution. And I think that's something else we forget. People are looking for these solutions oftentimes. Exactly. They're looking to solve this problem.
Exactly.
So why do you have this problem? What's your why now? And, Christine Rogers from Aspireship actually taught me this. She really hammered home the why now. And what I realized was if you can find that pain point of exactly why now. So, Chris, tell me why, y'all are struggling with this. Okay, you give me a reason. Yeah, but why now? Why are you having this conversation today? And they kind of go back to that stock reason. You don't want to push, but if you can, but why, Crystal? Really, did something happen? Well, you know what, Nick, funny you say that. Actually, once a quarter, my manager comes out and blows their lid because of ABC. Well, now I know what the real problem is. Now I know how to pluck on that string and really make sure that I'm framing the conversation to that pain point, right?
Well, and as you were sharing that, I'm reminded of one of the things that we talked about, and we might have even talked about this in the workshop. There's 3 levels of needs, right? We talk about 3 levels of customer needs, but honestly, there's 3 levels of needs for everyone, right? There's the stated need, the unstated need, and the unstated emotional need. And it's not until sort of like what you were just sharing where, well, the real problem is once a month, the boss comes out and explodes and everyone feels horrible, right? And we're all afraid of the boss, right? Now we're at the emotions, right? And that's where the other thing that strikes me is, you said it's all about discovery. And if we think about it, what's discovery? It's asking effective questions.
Yes.
And I'm reminded of the Socratic method of teaching, right? What's the Socratic method of teaching? It's teaching through the use of effective questions. And they say that the best teachers help their students discover their answers for themselves, right? I believe that the best sellers help customers become convinced themselves. And how do we do that? Through questions, right?
Absolutely. And I'm going to take a second here, and I want to plug you, Chris, because Demostack, we actually brought you in for a workshop over a couple days. So I got to spend 8 hours listening to you, and as someone who has taught these skills for years, I was caught off guard by the level of detail that you went into. So just want to applaud you for that. I learn every day. But I sat there mesmerized learning through that workshop.
Well,
So
that's very nice of you. That's very nice for anyone to say, but coming from you, I take that in very high esteem. So let's talk about that. So you went from you were actually on stage selling watches and probably gems and all sorts of things, and then you moved into a training. What did you take from the skills on stage and apply to the training, and what did you have to do differently to succeed in that role?
So it's what I would call being camera ready, even though it was on stage, and I'll dive into that a little bit. So I think what's interesting is that if I look back and I'm really honest with myself, I wasn't a great seller. I was maybe middle of the road because I had a very Canadian approach to it, and it took me.
Which is to say what?
So culturally, and I'm painting with a broad brush, and this is my own anecdotal experience, but culturally, and I'm an American now, a very proud American. We are culturally used to being marketed to, right? It's capitalist society, so we're willing to hear someone's elevator, right? Most of the time, if you're cold calling all day, that might not feel that way, but I think that's very real. Where I thrived was, again, the broadcast background. I would keep people's attention. I would get people excited and engaged. So the skills that I would teach were based around that. I learned later the kind of techniques of selling, but that was 20% of what I was really teaching. What I was really teaching, my most successful people were the ones who I could make great on a stage. And I would dock in Miami on a Saturday, and I would go to Starbucks, and I'd see someone who was so charismatic, and I'd say, look, I know this is crazy, but I have this amazing job on a cruise ship. It's a sales job, but you should think about this. And they'd be like, I don't know how to sell. I'm like, I'll teach you that part. What I can't teach is the raw skills. And actually, I don't know if Munir is still here watching, but I've seen Munir present, and I'm like, you need to be doing something with content. Tony, who also commented earlier, he was in an AMA with me the other day, and same thing. He actually posted a video on LinkedIn today. I'm like, oh my gosh, like Tony, you're so natural at this. And that's where I think the opportunity is, whether you're on LinkedIn or whether you're in a demo or however, wherever you're trying to be camera ready, but those soft skills and really getting people pulled into what you're talking about. And that's everything from tempo and pace and when to pause. One of the hardest things, this was when I would really challenge someone, or this was kind of like a level 303 type thing. I'd say, look, when you say this line exactly for this client, I want you to walk to the front of stage. I want you to literally lean your body in and pause for 2 seconds and then say this. And you'd watch them, and I would make them count off in their head 1, 2, and they would pause for a third of a second. But what was interesting was once they got comfortable with that really impactful pause and then saying something amazing, or pausing and then just waiting for a reaction, right? But not being afraid to do that. And you want to be in control of the conversation. So even though when you're giving a demo, it's all about the client, but you're the one driving it, right? You're the one at the helm. So I think sometimes we forget that. And those skills to me were the most critical, the soft skills. I could teach the basic of selling. I could not teach people who just jumps off a page or through a lens.
What's impressive to me, Nick, is that I feel like you've taken the soft skills and you've actually transformed them into some hard skills, meaning skills that can be learned. Right. Just in the example you just gave, right? You've broken it down, because I think that's what's so hard about, quote, the soft skills, some of the things that can't easily be learned. But the example that you just gave of the perfect pause at the perfect time, I think that's something that I'm not sure I've ever articulated quite the way you just did. It occurs to me that I do that in some of the well-known sayings and stories that I share. One which many people have heard when I say he or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel. They want a hole.
Where's the shovel, Chris?
Right? It's always
You
down
have
here.
it?
I literally keep the shovel. I literally keep the shovel next to my desk because I do these workshops a lot, and I gotta pull it out on demand, right? But it makes me realize that the pause after he or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel is important, because it gives people a minute to think, well, wait a minute, what is he saying? And if they don't want a
100%.
shovel, what do they want?
100%.
Right? And then you land, right?
And here's something else, a little bit off topic of this, but I think is really interesting. And I have made this argument, and almost universally I get pushback immediately. Charisma is an acquired skill. You might have a natural aptitude to be charismatic, but there's so many things you can learn about charisma, whether it's eye contact, whether it's smiling, whether it's having your shoulders back when you're presenting. Little things, like even in live environments, like if I'm at an event, or man, I just go to the grocery store, kind of, you feel someone kind of walking behind you, and this is programmed in me now. I'll like pull the door open and let the other person go first, right? The things they taught you on cruise ships was, not, like, please, right? Like, and people are like, who are you, right?
Yeah.
But anyone can do that.
Yeah.
Anyone can do that, right? So I think if you start learning skills like this and you become more comfortable, then the world is your oyster. Because the reality is we live in a world, especially now, where we're very insulated. But people want to be around people. Even if you're an introvert, you still get some level of energy from being around people. It's rare that someone is so far to one side that they don't get that. And I think, especially as someone who has been traveling extensively this year, seeing people again at live events, and they're so excited to be there. But again, you want to be at the helm. So same thing. If I walk into an event, I want to walk in and be in control of the room. Right? I want people to think, oh, who's that person walking? Oh, who's that? That looks like it might be interesting. So it's all how you comport yourself and how you carry yourself. But all these skills are very easy to learn.
Well, and honestly, Nick, just listening to you here now, there's so much movement. You're leaning in and you're leaving out, and you're moving around. How much of that? How important are body movements and in that is our body language from your vantage point in telling a good story, giving a good presentation?
Critical, absolutely critical. So let's just talk. I'm watching you. So also, I'm in a very tight box here on this window. I'm in a little hotel
exactly.
room.
We decided, because we could. So we can show everybody. We could have done this if we wanted to, but Nick and I decided that we wanted to. We wanted to be a little bit up. A little bit more. Up close and personal.
So think about this. So one of the things when people are like, "Oh, I talk with my hands all the time," it's a problem. It's not a problem. That's great. The fact that someone is a hand talker to me is an asset. So one thing I would say, just keep your elbows to your side, and then otherwise, then you look like a pterodactyl a little bit. But what you can do is you can really, to put a point on something, right? Or to, welcome someone, or to really impactful. Think of it's almost like being an orchestra conductor, right? And people are going to be more bought in to what you're talking about when you're kind of leading them, because on a subconscious level, it all makes sense to them. And what's interesting is there's not really a playbook on how to do that, or at least I haven't figured out how to come up with one yet. But I think the key thing is, and this is important on so many levels, but if you're doing demos regularly, you need to record yourself. And if you're in a sensitive environment, I used to work with a fintech company, we couldn't record the conversations. I would have, my cell phone and just record my end of it. And the reason I would do that is when you look back, and I'm like, okay, not to put too fine a point on it, but now every time I would say that, if that was something I would say regularly, right? And I would just get into those, I'm just trying to stay in camera here, those gestures, you start to learn, oh, that one really worked with that, right? The other thing too, for recording yourself, which is so important, one is we have a lot of crutch words. So how can everything be amazing or disruptive? It can't, right? That's just not possible. So when I go through and I rewatch my tape, I'm like, oh, you know what? I said disruptive like 8 times. Let me go to thesaurus.com and find a better word, right? Or a word that I can kind of interchange. Because if I'm saying the same word over and over, it sounds like I'm getting repetitive. The other thing, people don't realize this is, if you do one thing, do this. Get the negative words out of your cadence. Can't, shouldn't, even maybe is a negative word. Because what it does is, psychologically, your prospect's frontal lobe, when you use a negative word, shuts down. They go into fight or flight mode, and they will not be as logical, and they're not going to be as focused on what you're saying, right? So how do you get that same point across, but without saying shouldn't or can't or etc., right? Like I was in a conversation the other day, just talking about negative words, and it's not even about putting a bad taste in your mouth, but someone was presenting me their product, and they spent probably 5% of the time bashing a competitor, right? And it was very obvious, even though they didn't say the competitor by name. And I said, you're turning me off, right? But it's not because I'm like, I like the competitor, or it's the negativity, right?
Yeah.
That's such a key thing. So I always tell people, record yourself, rewatch it. The first 10 times you do, it's going to be very uncomfortable, but the 11th, you're going to see the switch flip, and you'll get way more engaged watching yourself, and you'll become 10 times the presenter. You can actually self-coach on a lot of presentation skills if you just record and watch yourself back.
Such good advice. And look, I'm the first to admit, it's taken me a while to become comfortable seeing myself on video and seeing some of my own recordings. But to your point, I've learned and discovered some of my own mistakes, some of my own crutch words, as you said. The other thing that comes to mind for me, Nick, is just how intentional you are and have been. Like you said that, in order to fill an audience, an auditorium of 500 people, the day or two after they've arrived on a cruise ship, you were out just helping people out on the floor. And as a result, how can they not say, that guy Nick was what a good guy. Why don't we just drop in and give him some support? And you talk about how you were selling fintech, so you can't record it, yet you were clever enough. Let's see if I can get it right. You're clever enough to get your phone on you. It sounds to me like as much as you've developed the soft skills, and as much as maybe the soft skills come naturally to you to a certain degree, you've also been very intentional and very disciplined about how you have approached your profession as well.
Well, what's super interesting about that was it was essentially A/B testing 20 years ago, because I'd have 4,000 guests get on Miami on Saturday and then 4,000 new ones, right? So let's say I was selling a high-end scotch, just as an example, and I would say it one way, right? 18 words, and I paused between the 12th and 13th, and I sold 10 bottles. Well, next week I would experiment, because 1 week didn't make a big deal. Yeah. And I would change it slightly. Now it was 23 words, but I didn't pause, and I said this instead. And now I sold 20 bottles. Well, now I have a new baseline of what I'm doing. So because of that change every week, it allowed me to test things and try things. It wasn't by intention that I would go and help that line at Guest Services. That was by accident. I went one day and I'm like, well, this is a problem. Let me see if I can help. In my mind, I was always a hotelier first, right? I really felt that way. Yeah. People are on vacation. I want them to have a good time. So it was by accident, and then I saw the results. So it just became part of now what I did. So a lot of it wasn't kind of like sitting back thinking, well, I could try this or try that. It was just observing myself and what I was doing and where I was getting traction or interaction.
Habit number 6, man, to perfect, right? I mean, we always need to be looking for how can we improve, right? And reflecting what worked and what didn't. Folks, for those of you who may have joined mid-flight, I'm speaking with Nick Capozzi, the chief storyteller with Demostack. If you have any comments or questions for Nick, please feel free to chime in. We've got about another 10 minutes with Nick, and then he has got to pack up. In fact, I think you're already packed. You just got to grab your bags and rush to the airport. Right.
By the door. I got to get to the airport so I can go home and see my daughter and have a great weekend with her. Excited. I've been on the road almost for 11 days now, so it's time to go home. So
let's talk about the road for the last 10 minutes. You're planning a road trip, and you've done this before, so you're no stranger to this.
Yes.
So let's talk about this road trip. What's going on?
So Demostack is doing a storytelling tour 2020 across the Western United States. We're doing 30 days on the road. We have a Jeep Gladiator, which we are wrapping with some of our partners and friends. And we're literally going from San Diego, LA, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, Boise, Salt Lake City, Denver, and Phoenix over 30 days. And we're just going to be having great conversations with some really interesting people, but we're also going to do things like storytelling in the park. Like in San Francisco, we're going to be in Golden Gate Park. Maybe 10 people show up, maybe 20. You want to talk about storytelling. You want to talk about being camera ready. You want to kind of give me 5 minutes to your demo and I'll give it back to you, how maybe I would present it, whatever you want. But we're going to go around. We're going to make a ton of content. They've actually given us a videographer, and we're talking to some of the brightest minds in sales. It is so exciting. And in fact, surprise, Chris White is actually joining us on this tour. So Chris is going to be coming in San Francisco, and we're going to spend a day together in San Francisco, and then we're driving 10 hours in the Jeep, you and me, having conversations. We're going to record it all, and we're headed to Portland, Oregon together. So if you are in any of those cities, definitely, if you go to my LinkedIn profile, or Demostack's actually is better. There's a few posts in there, but 2 or 3 posts in is the tour schedule. So if you're, hey, I'm in Seattle, I want to come hang out. And again, we have some really big names. I'm shocked at how many big names have confirmed on this. So it's pretty exciting. This is going to be a lot of fun. And I did do this actually years ago. I won't get into that, but I did 32 live events in 32 days in 32 cities. That was 14,000 miles over 32 days. This is only 4,500 miles.
So this is, 30. I mean, this is a cakewalk for you.
I'm ready to go.
And just real quick, remind me, what was the product or the company that you were doing that you did the other road trip with?
It was for a sports show. So what was cool about Cruise was that everything was a contract. So occasionally I'd be like, I had a really good contract. I'm like, I'm going to take 6 months off and maybe toy with something. So I sold a sports show to a network in Canada. And we did, 32 events in 32 NFL cities. So I was in front of all these football stadiums. I'd be in Pittsburgh in front of Heinz Field, and, then drive to Philadelphia and be in front of, I forget what it's called now, the Link, I think, in Philadelphia. But it was just a lot of fun. And what was interesting was, so I'd be in Philadelphia. What I thought was really interesting was, we were doing this on Twitter back then. This was 8 years ago. People wanted to talk about the food. Well, Nick, where are you getting a cheesesteak in Philadelphia? And that would become 30, 40, well, you got to go here. No, you can't go there. You got to go here. And you got to get it, Wit Whiz or Whiz Wit or however they say it. Philadelphia's going to laugh right now. But it was super fun. And actually last week I was in Chicago at a pre-sales collective event, and a friend of mine, Chris Bogue, very funny guy. You should follow Chris on LinkedIn, Chris Bogue, Bogue, just because he's hilarious. But we did 60 seconds on, hey, I got a half day in Chicago. What's the 6 things I got to do in 60 seconds? So just having fun, kind of playing with being on the road and talking about cities. People love to talk about where they're from. Actually, I learned that on cruise ships. So it was funny. A lot of people who sold for me were not from America or Canada. They were from Serbia or from South Africa. So how do I teach someone from Belgrade, Serbia, to connect with Debbie from Des Moines? And one of the things that people who weren't from America that would always catch them off guard, let's say, I don't know, Virginia Tech was playing Virginia in a football game, and you'd have 10 people in Virginia Tech, hoodies, and everyone's like, I don't understand. Like, what are they doing? And I'm like, well, so where I'm going with this is, after, loved ones and themselves, what culturally we really love to talk about is where we're from.
Absolutely.
Right. So I would teach my people, find something you're passionate about. There's like 25 major cities in the US, right? What do you know about Denver? What do you know about Dallas? What do you know about Miami? So great example. I had this one guy from India, and he was so excited to kind of learn these techniques. And he said, okay, look. And I'd say, what are you passionate about? He goes, I love food. I love to cook. I love to make food. Great. So ask people, hey, where are you from? Oh, cool. I haven't been there yet, but what's the one thing I got to eat when I go through that town? And they would tell you, but now it became, you had it now in your data bank, right? So I still, to this day, I meet anyone from New Mexico. I'm like, how does the whole country not know about Hatch Green Chilies?
Hatch Chilies. I mean, in fact, I mean, so I think I told you, my wife was on a mission to visit all 50 states before the age of 50. And we went to Alaska last summer, and that was state number 50.
Wow.
And one of our trips was to New Mexico, and she's like, we got to go to Hatch, New Mexico, and have a Hatch green chili burger. So we've been there. So to your point, like whenever I'm talking to people, like I can make those connections, right? Like we literally went to Winslow, Arizona, so we could stand on the corner of Winslow, Arizona. You know what I mean? I mean, so anyway, I interrupted your story. Finish your story, but
No,
no,
it was.
you're spot on.
It's great, and people get excited about that. I mean, actually, and I'm so, for me, it's natural. A lot of these things were just things that I grew up with through my family. But I think one of the first conversations you and I had, you're from the Cincinnati area, right?
My wife is from Ohio.
Okay.
Ironically, I was born in San Mateo, California. So I was born in the Bay
Okay.
Area. So I'm sort of going home, but I only lived there for a few years. DC is home. So
Right. Okay, that's right. But I thought we talked about Cincinnati. So I'm like, well, you got to go to Skyline and get three-way chili, right?
exactly.
But you say that to people, they're like, how do you know that? And now you have a friend. Because when you got on a cruise ship, there's like 12 revenue departments. The spa is sexy. The casino is sexy. Duty-free shopping is not sexy.
Right.
So we really had to build relationships and just, have people coming back and keep having discussions and keep looking at that watch. And I wasn't thinking about buying a watch, but you know what? That is a nice watch. And it's like, it's a nice piece for men, a really nice Swiss watch. You don't have to spend a lot of money. And it was really like a savings. I'm not trying to push duty free here, but like the way watch pricing works, if a watch is $1,000 in DC, it's $1,000 in Phoenix. They would offer a set Caribbean discount of like 5 to 35%. So it was a real deal. So people would get excited about it, right? And it's also a great way to commemorate your cruise. So
Yeah. Well, and the takeaway for me is you connected with people, and you were teaching your people. You were teaching, the sellers who were going through your program how to connect. And I love the fact that you took a very difficult concept. It'd be one thing to just stand up and go, well, you just got to connect with your audience. You got to connect with the passengers, right? But you broke it down to a very specific technique. Find out where they're from, and either know the food or what have you. So no, I absolutely love that.
Well, listen, and I'll put it into a seller's perspective, right? So you and I are about to get on a conversation. I'm going to look up your LinkedIn profile. I do for everyone before I get on a call. And I'm like, oh, he's in DC. Let me Google DC news. Oh, it snowed yesterday in DC. So, hey, Chris, I heard it snowed. You're in DC. I heard it snowed yesterday. I mean, how often does that happen? Did you like go out with the kids and make snow angels, right? So just those interesting talking points to bridge the gap. I remember one of the first demos I was ever on. There was like 10 people from their side and 6 people from our side, and we're waiting for like 2 other people. It's like
Nick, did we lose you, my friend?
No, I'm here.
Did the hotel just turn off your Wi-Fi?
No, I'm still here. Oh no, I'm
Folks,
here.
we may have lost Nick. Well, I don't know if he's back or not. Nick, are you back with us?
I'm here. I don't know if
well, I'm gonna give Nick another a minute. There he is.
No.
Are you back, my friend?
I never left. I kept seeing you the whole time.
And I was like, I think I'm still here. I think the hotel. I was like, I think the hotel just killed his internet.
Oh man.
So anyway, go ahead. Finish where you are, if you can remember where you were.
I don't remember where I was, but it's all good. Chris, this has been so much fun. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you, and I'll tell you, I cannot wait to hang out with you on this tour. So if you have a second, if you're watching this, just hit the Demostack LinkedIn page and just follow us. That's where all the content's going to be. It's going to be so much content and fun content. If someone commented here that they like the stories, this was fun today. This is going to be so much fun. We're going to have so much content, so much interesting stuff, and we'd love you to all interact with us. So just give us a follow on LinkedIn.
By the way, a few folks are chiming in saying you officially made my day. So, and you certainly have made my day. I was thinking about it, Nick. We called this storytelling, and I think we were gonna talk about storytelling. And ironically, I don't actually know if we talked about storytelling, but honestly, just watching you tell stories is all anybody needs to learn. Is follow this guy, listen to this guy, and you will learn. And I'm going to have you back because I've been seeing all the videos that you do. You've got such a gift for the short creative videos, and literally, I like one day I sat down. I was like, okay, I'm going to do something like what Nick does, and I didn't even know where to start. So you're gonna have to teach me. I know you have got to get to the airport. So go ahead. You had a thought to share.
I was just going to say, you and I have 10 hours together driving from San Fran to Portland. We're going to make a lot of short videos together.
We're going to make some videos together. I love it. All right, Nick, this is Tech Sales Advice. One final piece of advice from you before we leave. Wide open. Just one piece of advice.
Record yourself. I said it earlier. Record your presentations. Do it. Do that one thing.
There you go. You've got from Nick. Folks, this is Tech Sales Advice. If you like this and want to see more, follow the hashtag Tech Sales Advice. Look for Nick on the road, and I'll be with him on one of these sessions. Thank you so much for dialing in. If you were live, Nick, thank you so much for joining. Hang around for 30 seconds so I can give you your parting gift. Everyone else, have a good weekend. We'll see you next time. Bye, all.